Breaking news tonight from Russia. Reports are emerging of a deadly plane crash. Yevgeny Prigozhin, leader of the Wagner Group, is among those reportedly killed. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest details.
Russian mercenary group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin died in a plane crash on Wednesday evening. That's according to a channel affiliated with the Wagner Group. Russian state media confirms that Prigozhin was listed as a passenger and there were no survivors. 10 people were on board the plane, including 3 crew members. Russia's Emergency Situations Ministry said in a statement that the plane was traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg and had crashed in the Tibet region. Images from FlightRadar24.com show an unidentified plane flying northwest of Moscow, then disappearing from the screen. President Biden was asked to share his thoughts on the tragic incident.
I recall when I was asked about this by you, I said I'd be careful what I turn to what I wrote in. I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised.
Prigozhin was known for calling out the Russian military, saying the Wagner Group was not getting enough support. He also said the Ukraine war was based on lies and that the narrative Russia used to justify the war was not true. Russian President Putin has repeatedly said the war was a forced response due to actions from Ukraine and the West. In late June, Prigozhin led a mutiny in Russia against Russia's top military commanders. During the uprising, the Wagner Group took over a city in southern Russia called Rostov-on-Don. And surprisingly, residents in the Russian city cheered them on as the mercenary group advanced towards Moscow. Along the way, the Wagner Group shot down a number of military helicopters, killing Russian pilots. The president of Belarus said he talked Prigozhin out of the coup. And to reduce bloodshed, the Kremlin allowed Wagner fighters to return to Belarus. And what surprised many people was Putin gave Prigozhin amnesty for trying to overthrow the Russian military, which Putin said could have caused a civil war. Prigozhin eventually returned to Moscow, meeting with Putin 5 days after the failed mutiny, according to the Kremlin. Prigozhin later said the Wagner Group would no longer fight in Ukraine and would fight in Africa to make Russia great. And just this past Monday, Prigozhin posted a video online, which may have very well been his last.
We are working. The temperature is 122 degrees, everything as we like. Wagner PMC conducts reconnaissance and search actions, makes Russia even greater on all continents, and Africa more free.
Meanwhile, the war continues on, and Russia's capital continues to be attacked with drones. Russian authorities said on Wednesday 3 people were killed on the border of Ukraine in one of the latest drone strikes. Jason Perry, NTD News.
More defendants surrender at the Fulton County Jail in Georgia today, ahead of former President Trump's planned surrender tomorrow. All 19 are charged with conspiracy in connection with challenges to the 2020 presidential election results in Georgia. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has updates for us on the ground. Melina, what's happened today? What can you tell us?
So Rudy Giuliani, which is a former Trump lawyer and the former mayor of New York City, did surrender here to this Fulton County jail this afternoon. The process was rather quick, in and out, much of what we've seen for other co-defendants as well. He did have his mugshot taken. His bail was set at $150,000, which is slightly less than former President Trump. He is nearly charged with as many counts as former President Trump. He's charged with 12. Trump is charged with 13. Now, remember, Rudy Giuliani was on the front lines here in Georgia challenging the election results. For example, he did attend a legislative session here in Georgia where he presented to legislators what he said were examples of election fraud in the state of Georgia. Now, after leaving the jail, after surrendering, he did come to speak to reporters. He did not seem regretful at all about challenging those election results. He did say that he believes the district attorney is violating constitutional law. So we'll show you what Giuliani told a huge crowd of reporters after his surrender, as well as what his lawyer told me about their defense strategy. Watch.
He has violated people's First Amendment right to advocate the government, to petition the government for grievances, like an election they believe was poorly conducted or falsely conducted. People have a right to believe that in America. If you need to know what this is all about, the FBI stole my iCloud account. And you know when they went and stole it? The day that I began representing Donald Trump 4 years ago. You know when they gave it back? The day after I represented Donald Trump.
The racketeering statute is so broadly drafted, it gives the state an easier opportunity to get in all kinds of evidence and things that are unrelated. So that's probably going to be the first point of attack, to look at the
So with Rudy Giuliani's latest surrender, that makes a total of 9 people of those 19 defendants who have surrendered here to this jail.
So tell us more about Trump's impending appearance at the jail. How can we expect that to play out?
So we're expecting former President Trump to come here tomorrow. We still aren't sure about the time. We have seen reports that he could come tomorrow night during prime time. I mean, he's really trying to switch this around and trying to counter this messaging here with that prime time appearance, if that does happen. But his process will likely be like the other defendants that we saw. It will be a quick process. His bail is set at $200,000. The sheriff has said that they will be doing a mugshot and fingerprinting for him. However, we will have to wait and see what happens, because ultimately he's different than other co-defendants because he does have Secret Service protection.
A lot going on in Georgia. Thanks for that update, Melina. We'll certainly be checking in with you again tomorrow. And a Trump employee admits to lying. That's according to the special counsel's recent filing in the classified documents case. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has the latest on that.
A D.C. grand jury witness in the classified documents case against former President Trump has changed his testimony. Special counsel Jack Smith's team said in court filings Tuesday that an IT worker described as Trump Employee 4 in the indictment retracted his prior false testimony and provided information that implicated Nauta, De Oliveira, and Trump in efforts to delete security camera footage. It says when the witness testified in March, he repeatedly denied or claimed not to recall any contacts or conversations about the security footage at Mar-a-Lago. But the government's evidence showed otherwise. The IT worker, now identified as Yuskel Taveras, oversaw the surveillance camera footage at the property. He had been represented by Stanley Woodard, the same attorney who represents Trump's valet, Walt Nauta. Taveras switched to a federal public defender on July 5th, shortly after the June indictment. Chief Judge James Boasberg had referred Taveras to the public defender in response to prosecutor concerns about a potential conflict of interest. The filing states that Taveras changed his testimony immediately after receiving new counsel. Prosecutors provided this new information partly in response to Florida Judge Eileen Cannon's requests for an explanation of why the government was using 2 grand juries in different jurisdictions. They explained that they needed to use the out-of-state grand jury proceeding to continue their investigation into false statements by 2 witnesses who testified in D.C. Smith's team also requested a hearing to address the attorney conflict. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And Republican candidates are already arguing as they vie to emerge in the first primary debate. That's as former President Trump seeks to reach an even larger audience by doing something else. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
The clock is ticking toward the first GOP primary debate tonight, where 8 GOP candidates will be fighting to seize that opportunity to make a name for themselves in their bid for the White House.
We got the first debate in this whole shebang we're going to be able to do. It should be a lot of fun.
So this is a good opportunity for me to introduce myself to the country.
But a racist frontrunner, former President Trump, is taking away much of the attention by skipping the debate and planning to post an interview with former Fox host Tucker Carlson on X just 5 minutes before the debate. Carlson said today,
"Whatever you think of Trump, he is, as of tonight, the indisputable far and away frontrunner in the Republican race. We think voters have an interest in hearing what he thinks."
Despite not being on the stage, Trump will loom large over tonight's debate. And his campaign, touting his influence, says his team will be tallying the number of times President Trump's name is brought up. And that's as GOP candidates are already fighting before the debate, as former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley criticized entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy as lacking awareness of the Chinese threats, and citing his comments,
Xi Jinping will not go for Taiwan until the end of my first term.
And President Biden said today that he would try to see and get as much as he can of tonight's GOP debate. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And as the Republican presidential primary debate inches hours within reach, what insights should viewers be hoping to gain? And what should we expect? Next, we hear from Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, a retired police detective and former Trump campaign advisor, who now heads up the advocacy organization Campaign for America. Lieutenant Rogers, welcome to our show. Thanks for coming on. What key policy differences would you say viewers should pay attention to tonight amongst the candidates? And how might these differences influence the party's direction?
Well, I think it's very important that each candidate deliver a message that will indeed reflect on the state of our economy. Much hasn't been said about that. They seem to be going back and forth, criticizing each other, and not really bringing policy differences to the American people. So the economy is a big deal. Anyone who walks into a supermarket today realizes that they're paying a lot more than they did a few years ago.
So given the current political climate, how do you anticipate the candidates will address topics like economic recovery, social issues, and foreign policy? And what should viewers take away from these discussions?
Well, I can tell you it's a great question, and I am not hopeful that they're going to do that, and I just hope I'm wrong. I'm a Republican, and I'm dedicated to being a conservative, but I'm very troubled over the fact that Republican candidates have spent more time criticizing each other, telling us how bad each Republican is, and not telling us how good they will do if elected. And you see that fellow behind me, Ronald Reagan? He had an 11th commandment years ago: thou shalt not criticize any other Republican during an election. I wish they would invoke that and stand by what he said.
Indeed, there has been some divisive comments going back and forth. But looking directly at the candidates themselves, what qualities should viewers be looking for that could effectively challenge the Democrats' nominee in the general election?
Very tough and very strong leadership. The ability to do again what the guy behind me did. Obviously, it sounds like I liked them and I did. But to make sure that they have enough leadership skills to bring Watt together, to bring both parties together. Reagan did it with Tip O'Neill. It could be done again. They need to know how to sit down and speak with each other, not at each other. So I'm looking for that quality of leadership to not just unite the entire country again, but you got to unite the leadership.
And so with such a diverse field of candidates, how do you think the GOP can balance the appeal to traditional conservative values and at the same time the evolving demographics?
Well, the GOP has to be a big tent these days. We have to welcome everyone into the tent of the Republican Party. Messaging is terrible. We have to let people know that the conservative agenda is one that will be valued by everyone across the board. No one should be discriminated against. No one should be removed from the party. You know, I get sick and tired of when I hear the word rhino, Republican in name only, when a Republican justifiably disagrees with a certain agenda. So the message has to be a united party will bring a united America.
And finally, what should viewers be looking for in Trump's interview tonight?
Well, I don't know if they're going to be looking at Trump's interview. I know a lot of people say they will. I will not be, because I'm interested in the future, not the past. And listen, I wish the President Trump well. He did a good job when he was president, but I'm one of those people who say, let's not be anchored down by the past, but let's look forward. Let's have a vision for America. That's why I think these debates are very important.
Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And next, to offer his perspective on the debate, Democratic strategist, civil rights attorney, and former congressional candidate, Robert Patillo. I spoke with him earlier today. Robert Patillo, great to have you on our show. Thanks for coming on. From your standpoint, what policy positions or shifts among the Republican candidates should Democratic voters pay close attention to? And how might these positions shape the narrative in the upcoming months?
Well, what I'm really interested in seeing is how Republicans react to the current consternation about criminal justice reform with regards to the former president versus the calls for criminal justice reform that we saw in 2020. That at this point in time, Republicans have the opportunity to take the issue of criminal justice reform by the horns and really talk about reforming mass incarceration, the criminal justice system, police brutality, et cetera, and relate that to President Trump. I'm interested to see if any of the candidates really take that as being their issue.
And some of the candidates do condemn Trump's indictments, and that is likely to come up tonight. How might Democrats use that as a talking point in response to the GOP primary discussions?
What I think is very important is that you're going to see two camps really rise to the top tonight. You're going to see the Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, Mike Pence part of the party that are being very sharply critical of the Republican Party and President Trump for his indictments. And then the other side, which is very much going to be supportive of President Trump. And I think Democrats are going to draw a bright line and say that you either have to be pro-democracy and pro-America, or you can be pro-Trump. You can't be both. And I think that depending on how that breaks out, that's really going to determine a lot about what the Republican nomination will be, particularly thinking about what the Republican nomination could be without Trump in the race.
And in terms of electability, what qualities should Democratic viewers be looking for in the GOP candidates' performances tonight, considering the potential matchups in the general election?
Well, I think what we're seeing from polling is that there's a large amount of discontent on the Democratic side of the aisle and an openness to actually seeing other candidates. However, it has to be a reasonable, middle-of-the-road candidate. I think someone like Chris Christie could make a lot of inroads with Democrats. I think people really want to see if Vivek Ramaswamy is really what he says he is, or if he's just kind of playing Borat and doing a social experiment by playing an internet troll turned presidential candidate. I think there's a lot of fleshing out that's going to happen, but President Trump sucks up so much air on the Republican side of the aisle. This is going to be the first introduction that many of these candidates have to a larger audience.
And looking more at policies here, Democrats seem to anticipate the possibility of Republican candidates endorsing national restrictions on abortion. How might Democratic candidates leverage this issue to mobilize their base and highlight the differences between the parties?
Well, we saw in the 2022 midterms that Democrats have gone fully in favor of women's rights and women's reproductive rights. I think that we're seeing that 70% of women, including 60% of conservative women, believe that you should have bodily autonomy as a woman. There should be a choice between a woman and her doctor. And I think that we see a group of almost all men, with the exception of Nikki Haley, coming out very strongly on controlling women's bodies. So that really writes the 30-second ad and swing Senate seats around the country. Democrats have an outside chance of getting to 60 votes in the Senate in 2024. And I think that that's going to be the main thrust of this, to be able to push this back on Republican candidates nationwide and potentially swing some of these swing states in favor of Democratic senators.
All right, Robert Patillo, Democratic strategist, civil rights attorney, and former congressional candidate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Speaking of the debate, GOP candidate Larry Elder has filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission. He says he met all of the criteria to qualify, including 3 national polls with at least 1% or more of Republican votes.
At the last minute, I get a phone call from the chairwoman of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, and the debate czar, whose name is David Bossie, and they told me that they were rejecting one of the 3 polls we submitted. The one they rejected is called the Rasmussen poll, and they said they were rejecting it because it is, quote, affiliated with Donald Trump, close quote.
Elder said he wasn't aware that he couldn't use polls affiliated with any of the candidates. He also said that Rasmussen posted a statement on Twitter saying that he had nothing to do with their poll and that Donald Trump had nothing to do with their poll. Elder said he has the option to file a lawsuit later, but he expects to be on the debate stage tonight. Another Republican candidate, Perry Johnson, also says that he met the necessary qualifications and announced that he will take legal action against the RNC. And what do audience members at the first Republican primary debate care about? They told NTD who they're supporting tonight and named the top issues for them this election.
Voters at the first Republican primary debate in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, tell NTD which candidate they are supporting and why.
I'm here because I love, and we're all here because we want to support Donald Trump.
Okay, why?
Because he's the best candidate in the Republican Party. He's the best candidate in the country. He puts America first in the world with his policies, and he loves our country, and he's been proven to win in his previous term.
Big fan of President Trump. I also do like Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis too. Those are a couple of solid candidates in the race. Definitely all in for Trump right now.
I am a huge supporter of Donald John Trump.
Why is that?
Because if there's any person who's going to be able to take this country back, it is him and only him. But I think what we're seeing here today is just going to be who's going to be vice president or who is going to get a position in Trump's administration. This is what this whole thing is about.
So what are some of the top issues that they care about?
Just the economy, the way the we're the most indebted nation on the planet Earth, and now we've got an open border that's being flooded with millions and millions of illegal aliens. And they're coming here when we can't afford to house anybody.
The top issues for the youth, especially in the state of Wisconsin, are like pro-family, good economic policy, and good foreign non-intervention policies that Trump supports.
For me, as a younger voter, probably a lot of the social conservative issues like the transgender and all that kind of stuff that we have just seen come to light in the last few years here as we see.
New information on the passing of former President Obama's personal chef who recently drowned. The autopsy report indicates that the death was ruled an accident. Massachusetts public safety officials commented on the new autopsy report. It states that the cause of death for 45-year-old Tafari Campbell was drowning. The manner of death was ruled accidental. Campbell's body was recovered from this lake on Martha's Vineyard in late July. He had been working with the Obama family since 2017 when they were still living in the White House. Campbell leaves behind a wife and 2 children. Over $1 billion recovered from stolen COVID-19 relief funds and thousands of alleged thieves charged. But the Justice Department isn't winding down. It just launched 2 new initiatives to go after the crime. The DOJ states that it's seized over $1.4 billion in COVID-19 relief funds that criminals had stolen and charged over 3,000 defendants. In the same statement, the department announces the launch of 2 additional COVID fraud enforcement strike forces, one in Colorado and one in New Jersey. This brings the total number of strike forces to 5. The other ones are in California, Florida, and Maryland. And around 1 million Tibetan children are in Chinese state-run boarding schools. Now, the U.S. is stepping up sanctions against the Chinese communist regime. NTD's Sam Wang has the details on that and bills to protect U.S. land.
Washington plans to block the visas of Chinese officials who are involved in the forced assimilation of Tibetan children. According to the State Department, it impacts current and former Chinese officials, in particular those who are involved in state-run boarding schools in Tibet. The UN reports that around 1 million Tibetan children have been forcibly removed from their families due to China's re-education policy. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Tuesday, these coercive policies seek to eliminate Tibet's distinct linguistic, cultural, and religious traditions among younger generations of Tibetans. He then urged the regime to end the repressive policy all throughout China. Last December, Washington also sanctioned 2 high-ranking Chinese officials over human rights violation in Tibet. On the local level, lawmakers across 33 states have put forth 81 bills this year, all aiming to restrict Chinese citizens from buying properties near military bases. Some of those bills are now passed in states such as Alabama, Idaho, and Virginia. Those in support see the land as a national security interest, noting that the Chinese regime could use the land to spy on critical U.S. infrastructure nearby. Additionally, they also fear that the country's food supply could be in jeopardy if too much agricultural lands ended up in the hands of foreign entities. The bills gained attention back in February following a Chinese spy balloon flying across the U.S. before Washington shot it down. Sam Wang, NTD News.
And an Indian spacecraft landed on the south pole of the moon today in a mission seen as crucial to lunar exploration and India's standing as a space power. Rachel Faber produced this report.
India has successfully landed on the moon. Not only does that have implications for the future of lunar exploration, but also the country's standing as a space power. Here's what you need to know about the Chandrayaan-3 mission. The mission was launched on July 14th and was headed to the moon's south pole, where no one's been before. The South Pole is home to frozen water, which could be a source of water, oxygen, and fuel. That opens up possibilities for future missions, moon mining, or even a colony. The Chandrayaan-3 lander is about the size of an SUV. Explorers will now spend 2 weeks running experiments, including analyzing the mineral composition of the moon's surface. India's previous attempt to land on the lunar South Pole failed in 2019. Rough terrain is one of the complications of a South Pole landing. But India's space agency says it made adjustments this time that made it more likely to stick the landing. The successful mission makes India the 4th country to land on the moon, just ahead of national elections next year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is looking to spur investment in private space launches and satellite-based businesses. India has said it wants private space companies to increase their share of the global launch market by 5-fold within the next decade.
2 people were detained as dual rallies sparked tensions in downtown Los Angeles. Parental rights and LGBT groups clashed over policies that would require schools to notify the parents of children who identify as transgender. NTD's Christina Corona has more.
Around 200 people marched through downtown Los Angeles on Tuesday to express their opposition with what they believe is the wrong influence, sexualization, or grooming of kids in schools. They organized a parental rights march through Instagram at Leave Our Kids Alone, supporting certain school district policies. These policies mandate schools to inform parents if their children identify as transgender or seek to adopt a gender different from their assigned birth gender. The group gathered outside Los Angeles City Hall and marched to the Los Angeles Unified School District headquarters located at 3rd Street and Beaudry Avenue. Some protesters sat down in the street, leading the police to declare an unlawful assembly. Meanwhile, a smaller group of counter-protesters, some holding pride flags, formed. LAPD set up lines to separate the 2 groups. According to reports from the scene, police attempted to push the counter-protesters back, but 2 people allegedly resisted and were taken into custody. Critics like Ground Game LA and Queer Nation Los Angeles accused Leave Our Kids Alone of spreading hate and fear. The Leave Our Kids Alone members had American flags and signs saying parental rights matter and teach the Bible, not porn. State Attorney General Rob Bonta said he is investigating if the Chino Valley Unified School District had violated civil rights of students by adopting a parental notification law earlier this year. Christina Corona, NTD News, Los Angeles.
Top asset manager Blackrock today reported a further decline in its support for shareholder proposals on environmental and social issues. For more on this, I spoke with NTD Business's Don Ma. Don, welcome. Great to have you on our show. Changes afoot at Blackrock, it seems. What's going on there? Tell us.
So, Steph, it appears that the major asset manager BlackRock is dramatically lowering support for environmental and social proposals from shareholders over the past year. So what does that mean? Let me give you some numbers to put that into perspective. The company only supported 7% of shareholder proposals on environmental and social issues. Now, this is 3 times lower the support compared to the previous year, and it's a whopping 7 times lower compared to 2021. Now, in 2021, BlackRock supported nearly half of environmental and social proposals, so that's a huge difference.
And Don, what do you put these changes down to? What's the cause?
So the reason in the report was that because proposals were lacking economic sense and that they were unlikely to bring long-term shareholder value, and many of the proposals would not be helpful to the companies in its funds. So BlackRock is also saying that its declining support for ESG proposals sort of follows a broader pullback on ESG among investors in the industry, which, Steph, by the way, is actually true because industry support for environmental and social proposals in the past year declined about 10%.
So looking at all these changes, would you say that BlackRock is having some kind of change of heart when it comes to ESG policies?
It could be the case, but I'll let our viewers decide the answer to that question. But let me give you some facts. Back in June, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink actually said he's not going to use the term ESG anymore. And just last month, BlackRock appointed a Saudi oil executive to its board. Mind you, the company has been very vocal about sustainability and decarbonization. And oil is supposedly against all of that, and yet BlackRock appointed the chief executive of an oil giant to its board of directors. So I'll let our viewers decide if it's changing its mind on ESG.
And would you say that it's possible BlackRock is pulling back from these policies due to backlash against them?
Well, it could be, Steph, because the firm has faced intense scrutiny from U.S. investors and politicians in recent years. Republican governors and other state officials have pulled billions of dollars in public pension funds out of BlackRock. Larry Fink even said back in January that BlackRock had lost about $4 billion in managed assets as a result of the backlash against ESG. So it's very possible, Steph.
All right, Don, thank you so much. Great to hear your insights.
Thank you, Steph.
Hollywood studios have proposed a deal to end the writers' strike, but the Writers Guild has rejected it, accusing the studios of trying to make the strikers turn on each other. NTD's Colin Frederickson has more.
Hollywood studios have proposed a deal to end the ongoing strike by writers. The president of the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, Carol Lombardini, says its priority is to end the strike and end the hardships that so many people and businesses that service the industry are experiencing. The proposal includes the highest wage increase for the Writers Guild of America in 35 years, a compounded 13% increase over a 3-year contract. Certain writers could get a 15% increase in their minimum rate. The studios say this could mean that for some, their pay could be over $9,000 a week for up to 19 weeks. And written material produced by artificial intelligence would not be considered literary material. Also, writers would get viewership data, so they would know how many people were watching their content.
That is not a bad offer. If normal people read that it's $14,000 a week for a writer in the writer's room, or $12,000, then you lost a sense of reality, what the normal income situation is.
Producer and director Ua Ball has worked with actors like Jason Statham, Ben Kingsley, and Michelle Rodriguez. He's trying to cast Wesley Snipes in his new movie, but can't because of the strikes. He says we shouldn't forget that many of the strikers are very blessed in comparison with the rest of the world.
I feel like they acting like they're fighting for the small worker, but they're not. I know a lot of crew people, they suffering now. Gaffers, electricians, drivers, catering companies in LA, restaurants have massive problems now. Stuff like this.
The Writers Guild has rejected the offer. It says the proposal contains limitations, loopholes, and omissions which fail to protect writers. The Guild accused the studios of being disingenuous and trying to get them to cave.
They're dragging this out. Why, I don't know, because this means nobody's working.
Actress Laura Orrico is striking with the Screen Actors Guild. She says she wants the writers and actors to hold out until they get a fair deal. She herself has been affected by the strikes.
There have been a few gigs I've been able to do. There's some commercial projects. I'm a hand model in a voiceover thing I was able to do. I do audiobooks too. So there's a few things, but it's not much. It's not how we make our living.
On the side, Orrico also runs a PR agency called Laura Orrico Public Relations. And aside from actors and writers, film critics are also hurt.
It's pretty bad. Obviously, with the actors and writers on strike, the press junket and interview opportunities are becoming much more slim.
Film critic Sean Bowman believes the offer was a step in the right direction. He says the longer the strike goes, the more everyone is hurt, including him.
It's especially the case with it heading into award season and festival season, because there are a lot of film festivals where they tend to be cash cows for film critics like myself, and they're not going to be as profitable this year.
The Writers Guild of America says it will soon release a detailed description of the negotiations. Colin Frederickson, NTD News.
And now for your sports news. Here's NTD's Dave Martin with an update from a former tennis great.
That's right, Steph. Serena Williams announced the birth of her second child yesterday, a baby girl named Adira River Ohanian. The 23-time Grand Slam champion announced the news over social media, along with husband Alexis Ohanian and daughter Olympia, who's 5. Now, according to her husband on X, formerly known as Twitter, baby and Serena are healthy and happy. The 41-year-old Williams last played at the 2022 U.S. Open, bowing out in the 3rd round. Prior to the event, Williams, rather than saying she was retiring, said she was evolving away from tennis. Her 23 major titles are second only to Margaret Court's 24. And in college football news, former USC star running back Reggie Bush plans to file a defamation lawsuit against the NCAA over a statement released by the organization 2 years ago that suggested his career was a pay-for-play arrangement. The statement in particular was in response to a question about whether Bush would have his record restored in light of the NCAA's then new name, image, likeness rules going into effect, and it was released to media outlets in late July of 2021, saying in part, quote, although college athletes can now receive benefits from their names, images, and likenesses through activities like endorsements and appearances, NCAA rules still do not permit pay-for-play type arrangements. Now, pay-for-play has generally been referred to players getting paid outside those marketing type contracts. Bush's case is one of the more famous NCAA investigations. The 2005 Heisman winner had to forfeit his trophy in 2010 after a 4-year investigation determined he received improper benefits during his time there. Bush's lawyers called the NCAA statement, quote, completely false and highly offensive. Now, for your sports viewing schedule tonight, 7 baseball games are on, including one with 3-time Cy Young winner Clayton Kershaw, who will be on the mound as the LA Dodgers play at the Cleveland Guardians. And that's it for your sports news today. Steph, all yours.
Thanks, Dave. And if you have any news tips or feedback for our show, remember that you can email us at eveningnews@ntd.com. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. Good night.